still on its old Shiur, and it's being Shiur, not Navi. Sorry, there. I'm gonna look like I'm oversized here. A little bit smaller. Yeah. Tov. Hi, Tzvi, how are you?
Hello.
Hi, Harold.
Good.
I see it's cold on Highland, huh?
Yes, I'm always cold.
You're frozen.
Yeah.
Put up the heat.
Where are you? Oh, there you are.
Where are you hiding?
I can't see.
I want to see you, not you be seeing
Yes.
me. If you move further back. Problem is we have a desktop.
Oh, I see. Yeah. That makes
You have it
sense.
on a dining room table or something, or kitchen
On
table?
the kitchen table, yeah.
That's-
Ugh, tired. How was your Shabbos?
Very nice.
Very nice. Thank you.
You do got a show.
We
Usual.
went, well, yeah.
You went out for lunch?
Yeah, we went to Judy Favors for lunch. It was so nice.
Oh, how come they not coming to the desert?
He's going away. He's
Who's he
going.
going?
He's going to France.
Yeah,
I
I
think.
wanted them to come and they
Yeah. He's involved with the reburial of the soldiers. So he's going to Verdun, which is the First World War. They have Jewish soldiers who were not buried properly, so they're reburying them.
Oh, so they're both going.
No, only he's going.
You see the Israeli headline on Israel Real Time. Israel becomes first UN member to recognize Somaliland.
I saw that. Yeah, I had to look it up.
What the heck is that? We love the Somalis now?
No,
We
but it's a
shipped them all back from
breakaway.
Minnesota?
It's a breakaway. Now that they're loaded with billions of dollars from Minnesota, the capital of Somaliland is St. Paul.
Yeah.
How are they so clever? How did they figure it out? I've been here 76 years and I can't figure out how to scam the government. They figured it out in 2 weeks.
Yeah. They're in billions of dollars
The
already.
Indians as well.
No, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
No, but the Somalis, they let him get away with it. That's the problem. They closed the eyes, let him do it.
What did they do?
Oh.
How did they scam them?
Ernie's starting this year.
They made up these businesses that they're gonna get money from the government, healthcare, and it was all baloney. No one checked.
Correct.
And Bernie will explain how it's done.
Then he was what?
I helped it. I helped him to see clearly.
Yes. Dalit?
Eric Dahlin, correct. Pasuk Aleph. Let's look at that. By the way, the last word in the previous parak was Ve'ayir Shushan Navocha. the city of Shushan was in confusion. Rashi says, HaYehudim Sheba, the Jews that lived in Shushan. So I've shown you this book before, Erica Brown.
We found it in the old city.
Yeah.
I found this on our trip to Israel in the old city. Esther, Power, Fate, and Fragility in Exile. It's a very good book. She says on that statement, Rashi and Ibn Ezra interpret this as the Jews of Shushan rather than the general population of Shushan, or let's say the Jews outside of Shushan. Outside the walls of the city, Jews were an almost invisible and forgettable people. The city was dumbfounded because Jews throughout the empire posed no threat or danger. The Jewish presence was so minimal that the news would not have had a deep reach in society. It touched only those who were to be most affected by it. Rashi based his interpretation on a midrash that states there was little confusion for the non-Jews of Shushan, who stood poised to benefit from the massacre. The Gentiles of Shushan began to harass and taunt the Jews by telling them that they would be killed and their money would be confiscated. In other words, the Jewish residents were shocked and confused at the sudden human loss and monetary gain. The unity that Achashverosh strove to create with his lengthy opening celebrations collapsed into dissension at the sudden divide between the hunter and the hunted in this new political landscape. This reaction to Jewish death and agony is sadly all too familiar to students of Jewish history. Rashi died in 1105. The first crusade was in 1095. And this concept that the people who stood to benefit from the Jews' misfortune has been repeated when we left Spain. And Susie and I, when we traveled to Spain with Torah in Motion, we learned that a lot of this was not the Inquisition, and the religious aspect of it was just like a facade. That really the people were out competed by Jews. The Jews were the doctors, the Jews were the lawyers, the Jews were business people, and they wanted to get rid of the Jews because they were out competing them financially. And you can find the same story in Nazi Germany when Hitler took over. The Hitler and his cronies were madmen, but the remainder of the German population sort of went along with it, and primarily was because of the same thing. My mother, who was born in Frankfurt, would always tell us that on the main street in Frankfurt, like the Wilshire Boulevard, there were 9 department stores, and 8 of them were Jewish owned, and it was well known that they were Jewish owned. And of course, in the museums, they tell you 30 to 40% of the doctors were Jewish, and the attorneys and the business people. So the same thing that Erica Brown sees in terms of the glee of the Gentiles at the misfortune of the Jews, this is repeated us wherever we went. We're going to learn now in this parak that Mordechai immediately hears and he tears his clothes. But the Jewish masses had no idea how to react. Mordechai understood that what goes on with Jewish assimilation and exile. So I just thought that was a good introduction to where we are now in the story. So Perek Dalid, Mordechai yada et kol asher nasa. Mordechai knew what was going on. How did he know? Rashi, Bala Chalom Amerlo. He was told in a dream. And she iskimu ha'elyonim lekach. What's the dream to Mordechai? That this decree to destroy the Jewish people, this decree has also been affirmed in Shemayim. Rashi, Lefi Shishtach V'Latzelim B'Meinu V'Hanetzar. This is payback for the sins that the Jews did in the time of Nebuchadnezzar that we learned in Sefer Daniel. That's number one. V'shenenu Mesudas Achashverosh. Even though Mordechai and the other Sanhedrin told them not to go to the Suda that Achashverosh threw, they went. And the Sifsei Chachamim say, Ki zulat chet hatzelem lo nigzra lehem klaya kol kach. If you notice, Rashi puts the worship of the idol as the first reason, the main reason. And this is Chachamim learning that the Gzeira was ultimately the ultimate destruction because of that. Zulat chet ha'su'uda yadayin Hashem yizbarach maricha po. If it was just that they went to the Suda alone, Hashem would have held back his anger. However, vazen nechtam gzardina, but on top of the worshiping the Tselem and also the Suda, nimtza ofen ha'gzera haya bavor Tselem, v'chatima gzardin haya bavor Suda. That the initial gzera was already put into place when they worshipped the Tselem, and it was sort of signed, sealed, and delivered when they ate at the Suda. So Rashi says that Mordechai knew all, how did this decree is between Haman and Achashverosh. The Yismach Lev says, Mordechai is a Navi. Why doesn't he know it through Ruach HaKodesh? Because Ruach HaKodesh only dwells on somebody amongst Simcha. And we just said Shushan was in turmoil. Rav Elazar of Worms says that Eliyahu Navi told Mordechai. So what does he do? Vayikra Mordechai es begadav. He tears his clothing. Vayilbash sak ve'efer. And he puts on sackcloth and ash. Vayetzei b'sochayir. He goes into the city. Vayizak zakag dola umara. And he cries bitterly. He did not want to sit. He was sitting in royal attire at the king's gate. He tore off his royal robes. And he said, the P'tus Yaakov says, now I have to be with the Hamona. Why not? Why did he cry loudly? What about silent prayer, right? Chana, when we learned in Shmuel Aleph, Chana medaberes al liba. Chana spoke silently. And yet Hashem heard her. So he cried out in a way just like Esav had cried to his father to bless him. So now Mordechai says we're being sold, we're being slaughtered. Haman is a descendant of Esav, so therefore he cries out. Now, Mordechai, we know is Ish Yemini. He's a descendant of Binyamin. We've just been through the parshios of Yosef and his brothers. Yaakov also tore his clothing when he heard that Yosef was dead. So Mordechai, who is a descendant of Binyamin, it's no surprise that he would also tear his clothing and put on sak ve'efer. Mordechai was also a descendant of Shaul HaMelech, right? Ben Kish. Shaul is Ben Kish. And if you remember, Shmuel tells Shaul, Hashem is going to rip the Malchus away from you. And Shmuel turns away and tries to leave. What does Shaul do? He grabs his robe and it tears. So these are symbolic portends of the future of Mordechai tearing his clothing.
He even goes back further than that when you look at the Sak Va'ether, to Avram Avinu when he refused to bow to Nimrod's idols. He was thrown into the Kifshan Aish, and he came out, and Avram said, "Anochi Afor va'efer."
Right? Very right. Excellent. There's a medrash that Eliyahu Navi ran to the Avos, including Moshe, and was told, the reason for why, the fact that they were nana from the Suda. And Eliyahu asked Moshe Rabbeinu, you had davened multiple times in the midbar to save Klal Yisrael.
And another commentary says that why was he crying out loud? Because he wanted to see the Jews in Shushan, that he was crying, hoping that they would realize that they needed to do tshuva, because through their tshuva, Bnei Israel, the decree of Haman and Achashverosh would be nullified.
Okay.
It's interesting that he was crying.
Yes, sweet, go ahead.
Shaul was stared twice, the garment. One by Shmuel
And
one
David HaMelech in the cave there. Right, Tzvi?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you remember, the Tzvi mentioned tearing the garment of Shaul. So Mida Keneged Mida, what happens to David HaMelech when he gets old? He is very cold. They have to bring a woman, Abishaga Shunamit. Remember, we learn over there was a Mida Keneged Mida because he damaged the begodim of Shaul, so he was stricken with being cold.
Nothing but Shmuel.
No,
Shmuel,
you said by David. There, David also tore Shaul's garment when they were in the cave.
so he was punished, but Shmuel also tore his beged, so Shaul beged, so he didn't.
Well, no, what happened was Shmuel turned to leave, and Shaul grabbed Shmuel's beged and it tore. So Shaul really tore Shmuel's beged.
Oh, Shmuel beged.
Told Shmuel's beged.
Oh, okay.
Tore Shmuel's beged. I just want to say something else. So the Gemara in Megillah Yud Aleph Amud Beis says another reason why there was a gzeira that they should be destroyed. It says, Rabbi Lozer Pasuk La Pischel Har Parshos Meyacha from Koheles. Ve'atzaltayim yemacha mekareh uveshiflut yadayim yidlofa bayit. It's because of atzlut. They were lazy. Shayulayim Yisrael shlo asku b'Torah na'aser sono shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They didn't study Torah. And we had another remez for that in more Kiddushin. Elam shezachsa lilmod v'lo zachsa lelamed. Elam was where Shushan was. So there was some learning, but they didn't teach. Right? Anias the Torah be'elamhu. And basically, what Rabbi Lozer is explaining, how did they get to the matzav that they went to be mishtatef in Sudas Achashverosh? It's because they were not learning Torah enough. they didn't value what it meant to be Mamlechas Kohanim v'Goy Kodesh. And they were more mischaber with the non-Jews, and they didn't separate from them. So since they didn't study Torah, they were not Talmidim of the great rabbis of that generation, and therefore they didn't listen to Mordechai and the other members of the Sanhedrin, who told them not to go to the Suda. So that's this connection between weakness in studying Torah and the problems that eventually came to them. There's a Gemara that we have in Yuma, Alma avda haaretz al azvames toirasi. Why did we lose Eretz Yisrael? Because we have abandoned the Torah. And what does the Gemara say? What does that mean? Shelo birchu b'Torah tchila. They learned Torah, but they didn't make a bracha before. Now, the Gemara in Yuma there also says Bayis Rishon Nechrav, because there was Avodah Zarah, Gilui Arayos, Shvichas Damim, 3 cardinal sins. And there again, the explanation is because they were not studying Torah. They didn't value. What does it mean that they didn't make a bracha before? It means they treated it like chemistry, like other knowledges. When you make a bracha on studying Torah, you're recognizing how great it is to study Torah. And we want to elevate ourselves. But since they were not elevating the Torah, they were not appreciating the Torah, they got to those averos. We'll see one of the responses to the Gzeira, Mordechai went around and gathered children and studied Torah with them. And what do we say at the end? Kimu v'kiblu. At the end of the Sefer Esther, there's another Kabbalah Satorah. So we see what was the response to this terrible decree. Eventually, it was reacceptance of the Torah. So when we say that they bowed down to the Tselem and they were nene from Osasuda, there's all a reason behind that. The reason behind that is they got weak in their devotion to Torah.
The Me'am Lois goes further and quotes the Gemara in Tainus Tesvav. Mordechai had the ark containing a Torah scroll brought out into the main marketplace. He took out a Torah scroll, covered it with sackcloth and ashes, and read the portion from the Tochacha. In Batzar, sorry, not from Tochacha. Well, we usually read on Tisha B'Av, Batzar Lecha Mitzaucha.
The Echa.
Yeah. He tried to get the people to all pray, and ask for tshuva, because of circumstances of extreme distress.
Oh.
By the way, when we mentioned about Esav and his crying out of the brachas, Chazal tell us that happened B'leil Pesach. And here also, the same thing is happening B'leil Pesach, as we're going to see soon. So it's all sort of connecting. Weiter. Pasuk Beis. Vayavo ad lifnei Shar HaMelech. Now, you couldn't go into the palace wearing sackcloth, but he came close. He came ad lifnei Shar HaMelech. Ki ein lavo el Shar HaMelech bilvusak. You're not allowed to go there wearing sackcloth. He wanted to make sure, by coming close, to publicize what he's doing to Esther. He placed his face in Hashem first. And the Pasuk Gimel, Uv'chol medina u'medina, in every province, Mekom asher dvar melech v'daso magia, where the decree has been sent to all 127 provinces. Evel gadol Yehudim, sadness for the Jews. V'tzom, fasting, uvchi, crying, umispaid, mourning, sak va'efer, yutzal rabim. And they're also putting on sackcloth and ashes. The further from Shushan, says the Yad HaMelech, the greater was the mourning, because the Jews in Shushan who lived close to the king felt that they would eventually not be slaughtered. But those Jews who lived in the provinces had nothing to do with the king, they felt the danger even greater. Now, what's the La Rabim? So someone interpreted the most prominent, the wealthy people. Because even if you had assimilated and had become so Persian, they all shared the danger of annihilation with even the poorer people. Just like during the Holocaust. It didn't make a difference what kind of Jew you were. You were connected to Yiddishkeit, you weren't connected to Yiddishkeit, rich, poor, it was the same decree. Others learn Rabbi means the Gedolei Yisrael, the religious leaders. And the Yosef Lekach learns that Rabbi means Rishus HaRabim. Normally, people mourn in private. And here, the mourning took place even in the public square. The Mispei, because they saw themselves as dead already. They were doing a spadim for themselves. Now, because it says Lashmid la rogla beta kol Yehudim, the Beis Halevi points out that if they would convert away from Judaism to a different religion, they wouldn't be called Yehudim anymore, and they wouldn't be under the decree of death. And they could have just lemaris ayin saved themselves by acting as if they're converting. Yet we don't see that happening. We see that the Jews all they don sackcloth. They all saw themselves as dead already, and they had been maskim to die al kiddush Hashem and not to convert, even lifnim, even privately. Others learn that even if they had converted, they would have been killed. The Mishnah Brura in Siman Tafresh Ayin, in the name of the Levush, says, Chanukah tiknu l'zechra nes hadlokos neiros, v'lo tiknu su'uda kamo b'purim. Chanukah, what is the thing that we do to remember the nes? We light candles. You notice there's no Sudas Chanukah. Yes, people make family parties, but there's no mitzvah of a Suda like there is Sudas Purim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Niratam, de lo kavu kan l'simcha kamo b'Purim. So why wasn't a Suda established Chanukah? Ki b'Purim aisa gzeira lahashmid laharog la'abed es hagufos. Purim, the decree was to kill our bodies, which is bitul mishte v'simcha. Shu bitul mishte v'simcha, shafilu hemiru datam chatz v'sholem lo haya makabel oisam. It was complete annihilation. It wasn't the spiritual thing. Even if they would have converted to the Persian religion, it wouldn't have saved them. So when Hashem saved them, kavu lahalalo shabcho gam ken al yedei mishta v'simcha. Now, the Mishnah Berurah points out that individuals, could have worn Goyish clothing. They could have hid, so people didn't realize that they were Jews. That's mutter l'fi hadin. If a person is allowed to change his clothing when there's a gzeira, Yet, even though there's a heter lahalacha to do so, it seems that Klal Yisrael in that generation accepted upon themselves to be moiser nefesh and not to find mechanisms to save themselves. That's why we say hesped. They saw themselves already as dead.
It's not Bishat Ashmat that you not supposed to do things to hide yourself.
In Yoredeya, it says, Shulchan Aruch Yoredeya Kuf Nun Zayich Siman Beis. Im Kedei Shelo Yakiru Shehu Yehudi. In order for them not to know that you're Jewish, Mishana Malbusha B'Shas Gzeira Mutter. Kivan She'ena Omer Shehu Ovid Kechavim. He doesn't say I'm a goy. So there are certain methodologies by which you'd be allowed to save yourself. You can't B'Shas. What you're pointing out, B'Shas Hashmad, is normally we're supposed to only die for Yiddishkeit for the three Averos. Somebody says, kill that person, or I'm going to kill you, you're supposed to allow yourself to be killed. But if they say, you eat this chazer, or I'm going to kill you, you're allowed to eat the chazer. But B'Shas Hashmad, when there's a decree against Jews, and publicly they tell you, eat this pig, then you're also supposed to allow yourself to be killed. So that's what you're talking about, B'Shas Hashmad, you have to treat yourself more chomerdik. But privately, quietly, to change your clothing, etc., that's permitted, says the Shulchan Aruch. And they would have been allowed to do so. But we see in the times of the Megillah, they didn't do so. Why is that? Because here, they were metakin the chet of bowing down to the tzelem. Over there, they also didn't bow down to the tzelem to accept. It was only lifnim. It's only inside that they bowed down, but they kept themselves Jewish on the inside. So too, this whole gzeira of Haman was also done. In the end, HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't wipe us out. They bowed down because of Yira, and according to Rav and the Gemara, if you bow down because of fear to Avodah Zarah, it's actually not an Aveira, but it's Chilul Hashem. Now they're being misakin the Aveira of Chilul Hashem. When they were Makabala themselves to be moister nefesh, and not to convert even though they could have done it, even though it was a permitted methodology. And that's why I'm going to read from the Mishpat Zozav. Purim is the only holiday that's going to remain forever. All the other Yomim Tovim are going to go away. Kivan shemoida Purim niyal yedei mesiras nefesh shel Yisrael. L'kach yesh lem kiyum la'olam. K'moshe shamati b'shem harav HaKodesh bala divrei Chaim Mitzanz. Rav Chaim Halberstam, the Tzanz Rav. Shaya mevayer lama kedushat Beit HaMikdash nemar kedusha rishona kitchel l'shaita v'kitchel osid lovo. We have a principle that the kedusha that Yoshua invested in Eretz Yisrael remains forever. Yet al Har Sinai nemar b'meshech hayovel hema yalu bahar. After Matan Torah, Har Sinai has no kedusha. Shafila beimot yachlu lalot lahar. After the Shekhinah left Har Sinai, it was not a holy mountain. Yet, we are not allowed to walk on Har HaBayis in a state of Tumah today. It remains the Kedusha. So, Kedusha space of Migdash mitchila makedas Yitzchak. Shaita Bahara Moriah. She Yitzchak Allah b'mesiras nefesh al Akeda. Yitzchak, through Mesiras Nefesh, allowed himself to be placed on the Mizbeach. That's why the Kedusha of the Har HaBayis remains forever. So too, Purim, among all the holidays, we see this aspect of Mesiras Nefesh, that they could have converted. They could have acted as Goyim, but they didn't do it. Because they were willing to be moister nefesh, to be masakin the chet of the nishtach of Elitzelim. Rabbeinu Yonah in Shari Tshuva says, "Mi sheyesh b'yodo chilul Hashem Tshuva v'yom kippurim v'yisurim toilim umisa memarekes. We even if you are Baal Tshuva and Yom Kippur comes and you have Yisurim, that only suspends you. A person's death will eventually clear him of Chilul Hashem. So this pachad of Misa that fell on the Jewish people, that was part of the tshuva process. They already had kapara of the oven of Chilul Hashem by going through this. Why did this happen? This is part of the process. Okay. Weiter. Pasuk Dalet. Vatavona naros Esther v'Yisrael v'yagidu la. So Esther's maids, chamberlains came and told her that Mordechai is wearing sackcloth at the palace gate. Vatischalchala malka ma'od. She became greatly distressed. Machlokas Nagmor Megillah. Rab says she became a nida. Sometimes great emotion can cause that. Rav Yirmiyah said she had loose stools. Her stomach was loosened. That's what from Fatis Chalchal. Others say she was pregnant. She miscarried. Vatishlach gadim lalbishus Mordechai. And she sent proper clothing to dress Mordechai. Ulasir sako me'alav v'lo kibel. To have him remove the sackcloth, and Mordechai didn't accept it. Now again, we have to remember, Esther, no one knows that Esther is Jewish. It was well known that Esther had some connection to Mordechai, right? If you remember, Esther was one of the ones who appointed Mordechai, or suggested that Mordechai be appointed to the king's gate. Also, Esther was very tznuah, so she didn't hear what was going on. Esther understood that because he was mourning in public, this can't be something personal. It had to be a public calamity. And she was distressed that Mordechai had not informed her about this. So the reason she sent the begadim, she wanted Mordechai to enter the palace so Mordechai could explain to Esther what was going on. But what does it mean, v'lo kibel? The Malbim says he didn't want to stop davening even for a minute. He didn't want to appear that he's relying on a human being. He's relying on Hashem. Esther had in mind that she would be able to go into the king and to abolish the Gzeira. So there needs to be hishtadlus, even before the edict was publicized. So she didn't think that what Mordechai was doing is correct. He's walking around with torn garments in the streets. Everyone's finding out about this. And if it becomes public, Achashverosh, who is very haughty, is not going to turn away to annul the decree. So she wanted to do still a height quickly. Pasuk Hey. Vatikra Esther lahatach misarisei melech asher amid lefaneh. Esther summons Hasach, one of the officers of the king, who had been appointed to attend her. Vatitzavei al Mordechai, to command Mordechai ladat mazeh ve'al mazeh. Strange language. So Hasach is Esther's confidant who could keep secrets, says the Alshich and the Malbim. The Gemara says Rav Hasach is Daniel. So Daniel, why was he called Hatach? Because he was degraded, Chatchu, from his position. Remember, we say for Daniel, he was the officer of Belshazzar and Darius and Koresh. Or he made decisions, Chatach, on affairs of state. Now, what's this Mazeh ve'al Mazeh? Esther wanted to know what is the edict, what is it for, and for what great sin are we being punished? Is it the Jews? Have the Jews denied the Luchos Abris, where it says Mizeh u'mizeh heim ksuvim? Right, the Luchos are written on one side and the other side. That's the remez of Mazeh ve'al Mazeh. It must be that the Jewish people are doing something terrible. Just to remind everybody, why was Daniel cut down? Al Shenosan Eitzel Nebuchadnezzar. Remember, he gave Nebuchadnezzar an advice to give out charity. And it protected Nebuchadnezzar. Remember, he turned into an animal for a period of time, but it didn't happen until because he gave the charity. Chazal say, "Mnei nenash Daniel mipnei sheisi eitzel Nebuchadnezzar l'chalek tzedakah laniyim." Uv'zchut tzedakah lo yichol alav ha'onesh nigzar la me'ashamayim. That charity protected Nebuchadnezzar from the punishment that was nigzar when he turned into an animal for 7 years. So the Meshech Chochma in Megillah Esther has another pshat in why Chatchu Migdulaso. Gdula shel Daniel haytashu masar nafsho latfila. If you remember in Sefer Daniel, they made a gzer you couldn't daven, and he was moiser nefesh and he davened. That's why they threw him into the lion's den. Benitzu. Aval bisman hazeh shel gzeras Haman. Kiblu kol hayudim aleim mesiras nefesh. Like I explained tonight, there was tremendous mesiras nefesh by the Jews who accepted this gzeira rather than convert. So shekulam iskimu ba'atzmam libsor nefesh v'lo la'amir adat afilu lifnim l'marasayin v'nimsa sheyarg deglosa shekvar kol maskimim lekach. At the time of Daniel, it was only him doing such mesiras nefesh. Now, all the Jewish people are doing the same mesiras nefesh. So it's not as great anymore. Pasuk Vav. Vayetzei Hasach el Mordechai el Rechov ha'ir asher lifnei Shar HaMelech. So Hasach sort of drayed around. He went spatziring as if he's going to bump into Mordechai by accident. That's how Al-Shich learns. And they spoke in the public square, so no one could overhear their conversation or spy on them. And to speak in public, they must not be talking about anything so important. They sort of camouflage what they were doing. Pasuk Zayin. Vayegedlor Mordechai eis kol asher karahu. Mordechai told Chatach everything that had happened to him. Ve'et parshas hakesef, and about the money. Asher Omar Haman lishkol al genzei melech bayodim le'abdam. The money, the 10,000 kikar, that we said billions of dollars, that Haman was willing to give to the king's treasury in order for the king to go along with the decree to kill them. And he told him everything, that he didn't bow down to Haman, and that led to the edict. But the Me'am Loa says that the reason, because remember Esther asked her, Mazev al Mazev, what's the reason for this? Mordechai revealed that it's because they participated in Sudas Achashverosh. Now, look at the word Asher Karahu. So the Medrash says, Asher Korcha Baderech. When Amalek is described as somebody who cooled us off, from the word kor, kufresh, cold. That right after we came out of Mitzrayim, we were on a high, and they immediately tried to fight against us. That's one pshat in kar, cold. Another pshat in Amalek being from karahu, from mikre. They don't believe in hashgacha of Hashem, that Hashem rules the world. Everything is mikre. It's like what's that scientist's name? Stephen Hawking's. Everything is chance. Everything is random. There's no, it's all mikra.
Uncertainty principle.
Say again?
Uncertainty principle. Is that it?
No, Stephen Hawking's our guy. He's a scientist that, he doesn't believe in hashgacha pratis. I mean, Albert Einstein believed in the ancient one. He believed that there was a creator. They didn't believe in hashgacha pratis, that Hashem sort of controls the world. They were deists. They were more like Spinoza, like Newton, where Hashem created the world and withdrew from the world. Aristotle, they also said there was a prime mover, but the difference was Hashem isn't active in the world. And now Hawking doesn't even believe that there's a creator, that it's all random, and other scientists like that. So who is Haman descended from? From Amalek. So that's Asher Karahu. That's the simon here. Now, the reason Mordechai is telling Esther about the money, because you think maybe you could bribe the king with money. No. Haman has offered him billions, and it's not going to be, you're not going to be able to do it with money. Now, by the way, the copies of the decree that were published in the outer province said only that the goyim should be ready. It doesn't say that they're going to be annihilated. But Mordechai told Esther the truth, that the true intent is to destroy the Jewish people. Now remember, Achashverosh in the end doesn't take the money. He says, you can keep it. Because Achashverosh said to Haman, I'm giving it to you. So it wasn't because of money, it was because of pure anti-Semitism. He was a son of Yisrael as well. And you're not going to be able to change Achashverosh's mind with more money. Later on, by the way, Mordechai telling this to Esther helps her, because later on, when they're at the Mishteh, where eventually Esther accuses Haman, she says, Kinim karnu ani v'ami. It's embarrassing to the king to be told that, oh, you were paid off for this. And that made him angry. And that he says, Mi Hashem lo li balasos, like he acts, oh, who did this? When he says Haman Arazeh, it led to, his decree to kill Haman. Pasuk Ches. Vespatchein Savadas. He gave him a copy of the text of the decree. Asher Nitan B'Shushan, that was spread out in Shushan Lashmidam. That there it said that they're going to be annihilated. Nasan lo la Rosa says Esther to show Esther la Gidla to tell her litzavos alea, and now Mordechai takes action. He commands Esther lavola melech, go to the melech lischanin lo, to appeal to him ulvakesh milfanav alama, and to plead on behalf of the Jewish people. So here we learn that the edict that was spread in Shushan, that mentioned annihilation, not the other places. And now the Alshich comments that this is the time is ripe for Esther to reveal that she's a Jewess. Now, up until now, again, we've learned a debate. Some say that Esther is Mordechai's niece, but we know the Chazal that say she was his wife, right? Not his niece, not Levas, but Lebias. It was his wife. Now, up until now, Esther has not been willing to go to sleep with Achashverosh. So technically, you are not prohibited to live with your husband if, God forbid, a wife is raped. It's against her will. However, now going to Achashverosh beratzon, with her desire, so that's she wouldn't, first of all, you're not allowed to do it. It's an Isser. So she needed a command of a Navi to be matir the Isser. B'hoy Rasha. You're not allowed to have relations with someone other than your husband. So this command, l'tzavos alea, is a command by a Navi to go against the halacha. And we'll deal more with this issue of her going and having relations with him at this point. So, Pasuk Tes, Vayavo Hasach, Vaygev Lester Tivei Mordechai. So Hasach comes and says over what Mordechai told him to tell her. Vatomer Esther Latach Batitzavel Mordechai. Now, Esther is sending back another message, or to command Mordechai. Now, the message Esther is sending back is not favorable to Mordechai. Hasach may not want to reveal it to Mordechai. So the command is to Hatach. Vatitzaveh, we commanded Hatach to send the message. Now, what's the message? Let's get this to every Mordechai. Pasuk Yud Aleph. Kol avdei hamelech ve'am midinot hamelech yodim. So the king's servants and all the people that live in the provinces of the king, yodim, asher kol ish ve'isha asher yavo lamelech el hachatzer pnimita shelo yikarei. Any man or woman who goes to the king, to the inner courtyard, who is not called to do so, achasta solamis. The law is that he has to be put to death. Levad masher yoshit lo melech et shavita zahav chaya. Unless the king extends his golden scepter, and then such a person can live. Vani lo nikreti lavo lamelech zeh shloshim yom. I have not been summoned for the past 30 days. So She knows the law. She can't say I'm ignorant of this law. And this is not personal of King Achashverosh. This is a public law. It's like in the Constitution. It's a public offense, like Vashti, and therefore there's no exception to this law. So now here's the main point of Esther. Now, if I go and he forgives me for coming to him without being called, and he forgives me, it's not going to be a good time to plead on behalf of her people because the king has already shown her mercy. So there's already one favor that she's done. She needs the favor on behalf of Klal Yisrael. That is her main objection to what Mordechai has told her to do. So her comment that I haven't been summoned for 30 days was information that, you know what, I'm going to be summoned in the next few days. At that time, he doesn't owe me any favors. I'll be able to plead for the people. And she thought it would be better to wait and not do it right away. That's the debate now between Mordechai and Esther. Mordechai saw that there can be no loss of time. Had to be done right away. Others learn Haman had a special decree that nobody could go in to talk to the king without his permission because he was trying to control the king. And of course, he didn't want anybody to come in to be mevatel the gzeira. And the Maral, the Al-Sheikh, the Malbim say exactly like we just said regarding, using up her favors by going now. Now, I don't have an answer to the next question. And I think we're going to leave it with this question. This Mishmit Zov says like this. L'chura tzarich bir. There's a problem that we're seeing in this psukim. V'chachashverosh nasa porush. Did all of a sudden Achashverosh become like uninterested in Esther and in sexuality? Varei onat melachim b'chol yom. So the Gemara has a sugya. How do you, some people have relations once a week, like the Talmud Chacham, Friday night. Others, but a king has relations every day. Not only that, we had a pasuk that says, "Vayahava melech Achashverosh es Esther mikol anoshim." That, and Meforshim learn, once he got to know Esther, he didn't call any other women. He wanted nothing to do with any other women. So what does this mean that she hadn't been called for 30 days? It goes a little bit against some of the data that we have. It's just a tzarech bir. By the way, the Zohar and Mekubalim state that Esther herself would not go and have relations with the king. She would, there was a shade, like a demon, or I don't know, a goylem, whatever, and she would take, the shade would take her place. Because of course the Mekubal, they have that, and we'll get into that a little bit later as well. Now, we're going to stop now. I want you to take notice. The next, now it has to come back to, now this, right? Vatomer Esther lahatach, to tell Mordechai. But look at the next pasuk. Vayagidu leMordechai is divrei Esther. It should say vayaged hatach. First of all, hatach isn't even mentioned. And it says vayagidu. So the Medrash says, number one, when Haman killed Hasach here, he got angry when he saw Hasach coming in and out of Esther, and he killed him. And Michael and Gavriel, the Malachim, are the Vayagidu leMordechai. That's why it's plural. And there's no more Hasach here. The Yalkut Shimoni says that Haman kicked Daniel and killed him. And that's part of his Yored Migdula, so that we explain. But we'll continue more with this Pasuk, this Perek. And maybe we have a lot more to say at the end of this Perek. So we might start Perek A, we may not. We'll see. Any other questions, comments, ha'aros that anybody else want to make?
Yeah, I want to know why in the Tanakh everything's Mida Keneged Mida. Where does that thought we're not responsible for the sins of our parents? Everything you say is a Mida this because they went there, they got punished for this. Where's this come from?
Okay, so we know, the Ramban in his introduction to Sefer Shmos, Maisa Avos Siman Lebanim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's just, these are remuzim, Esther. I would answer, right, we have a whole Sefer Bereshis. What is that for? It's all ancient history, way before, going back. So we're being taught archetypes. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, the Midos of the fathers, Yosef, the brothers, etc. It's a Siman Lebanim. Things are going to repeat. Sometimes it's Dafka Mida Keneged Mida. It's not in every case, like we're told, remember, Yaakov hides Dinah in a box when they're crossing the river because he doesn't want Esav to see her, right? Because apparently Esav, he could have married, Dinah could have made Esav good. But because Yaakov did that, it's viewed like as a sin. So Mida Keneged Mida, that you have the episode of Shechem. So on the level of tzaddikim, they're on such a high level, they're judged kechut Sarah. So there we see sometimes Mida Keneged Mida. But sometimes it's Maisa of a Siman Lebanim. The Binyamin tearing, Yaakov with the Yosef tearing, later on it tears. See what I'm saying? It's not a direct, his father did something bad, so he's punished for it. These are more Maisa of a Siman Lebanim. It's a different thing.
I never saw anything with shading before. Whoever said about the shading over here, the shade was good.
The shade. She sent a shade. It's the Zohar. It's a Zohar. That's Nistar.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sounds like I'm looking for those kind of shade.
No, but the
Loshins.
Zohar said it was shade. That's going to come back. But you see, all the Meforshim basically deal with the fact that Esther had slept with Achashverosh. And how do we deal with it? Could she go back and live with Mordechai or not? Is she karka? So that's not shade. That's Esther. So the reality, regular Meforshim accept the reality of it.
But the Medrash is
she
not
had a child with him.
Not Medrash, Zohar. That's Nistar.
I understand, but a lot of people said that she wasn't Mordechai's wife.
Say it again.
Not everybody said. Everybody says that she was Mordechai's wife.
No.
So there's always a machlokes and where it comes from. So I don't know. It's not.
Yeah, but Rav held it's Labias. So all the Meforshim have to struggle with the halachic ramifications of sleeping with a goy and she's a married woman. You see, they took it seriously according to the opinion that she was a wife. It's in the name of Rav. So you have to explain if Rav says he was his wife. Well, how do we reconcile all these things? So in Echanami, even though there's an opinion that says it was not, there's a major Amoira that says she was the wife. So you have to deal with the problems, which we've been dealing with. I think we've been dealing with it.
Okay. Shkach.
That's good.
Have a good weekend.